Hello and welcome to the PreSnap Podcast presented by LineStar. We're going to go over tonight's Monday Night Football game, the New Orleans Saints versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We got a 41 total, and Tampa Bay is 3-point favorites in the game tonight. Before we get too far into this, let's first thank you for joining us, and please, if you have not already subscribed to our channel, it helps us out hugely in trying to give more and more content out for free. So it's a big help for us. Just, please hit the like button for the video, subscribe to our channel. It's a huge help to keep this show going. Anyways, next, let's just jump right into this game. This is not the game we thought it would be coming into the season here. Tampa Bay has really been reeling. They just can't really get it going on offense, and that's big time due to injuries. So we'll start with going through our injury report. Our good friends at sixscore.com kind of help us out with all this. So Tampa Bay has had major offensive injury issues, especially on the O-line. They have 3 O-linemen out, including Tristan Wirfs, who left last game injured and unfortunately is going to be out for this game. So that's a big loss to them. They also have a left tackle that backup left tackle who is questionable to play. So they have some major issues there. As far as the skill positions, we have Russell Gage questionable, Leonard Fournette questionable, and Cameron Brate questionable. These guys being out or in will affect the slate, so make sure you pay attention to that. And on the defense for the Saints, the only real big one is Marshawn Lattimore, who is questionable. I would absolutely pay attention to see if he plays or not, because there is going to be a big difference in the game if he is in. And we'll talk about that a little bit more further on in the show. And then for the Tampa Bay defense, their secondary is super beat up. Both safeties are out. And even the backup free safety, Mike Edwards, is doubtful. So the back end of this secondary is very beat up. We'll probably want to attack that New Orleans passing game. As far as their offense, Michael Thomas is still out. He's been out for a while. Outside of that, no real big issue here. Some banged up offensive line, but nothing really game changing. So with that, we'll jump right into the New Orleans Saints. So we're going to start off with Andy Dalton. This is a really interesting spot for Andy Dalton. Pass funnel defense with Tampa Bay, and the secondary is super banged up. So we have seen some pretty good games out of Dalton this year. Most of the time he's going to keep it conservative, but I think this spot in particular, the Saints really need to get aggressive and try and pass a little bit more. So I think Dalton is interesting, and the New Orleans Saints offense as a whole is going pretty unowned. People are worried about this Tampa Bay defense, but just keep in mind that secondary is very banged up, and how they play defense is they try and stop the run and let people try and pass, and just kind of a bend, don't break kind of mentality for a D. And with that secondary super banged up, there could be some miscommunication, and maybe they let a bigger play or two go through that they wouldn't normally have. So next we got Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara over the last 2 years has kind of struggled against the Buccaneers. He hasn't had a game over 17 fantasy points versus them over the last 2 years. As a defense, they are solid versus the run. They're going to key in on Kamara. So he might have some tough sledding here. Now, it is Alvin Kamara, so by all means, play him if you want. You can still use him as captain, as he is one of the highest ceiling players and highest floor players in the game. Tampa Bay does rank 5th, however, in allowing 0.4 rushing touchdowns per game. So it could be a little bit tough sledding for Kamara, especially because Mark Ingram is back, so his snap count might not be quite as high as it has been over the last few weeks here. Now let's jump into the wide receivers. We have Chris Olave. He is the obvious number one option and passing target in this game. So I really like Olave. He is one of my favorite plays on this slate. The combination of his chemistry with Dalton and that secondary being beaten up makes me really attracted to Olave, both as a captain or a flex spot or MVP if you're playing on FanDuel here. Now, next we got Jarvis Landry. So Landry has had 14 targets over the last 3 games, but he's only played 56% of the snaps the last 2. His first game back, he was in the 70% range. So it is interesting to me, and everybody's going to go at him as the number 2, so he's going to be played. However, much less owned than, say, Chris Olave. But just be a little wary there because his snap counts haven't quite been there. And having only 14 targets in 3 games, he's not getting a huge workload. I think the workload could be a little bit higher today. Just as I said, the path of least resistance for this defense is throwing the ball and trying to beat up on those safeties. So I like Olave or like Landry. Don't love it just because the target and the snap share hasn't totally been there. That could change this week. Another thing is we have Adam Troutman back at tight end, so he is going to be your starter. And he is one of the sleeper picks that I would like as far as on the Saints. Another one is Rashid Shaheed, who he's been playing 50% of the snaps over the last couple weeks, and he's a nice deep threat. And so with the banged up secondary, I think he's very interesting at a low price and low ownership. And lastly, you got to bring up Taysom Hill, right? His snap count keeps going up. He's up to 49% of snaps last game. So I do like going after Hill. Just don't go overboard because he is such a gadget player. He has a low floor but a really high ceiling. So he is interesting to play in some of these lineups, especially when he's not going to be super high owned. Now, let's get over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We have Tom Brady and the Bucs. Brady has had a tough time all year long. This O-line is very beat up. He keeps having consistent games, but he's really lacking that ceiling that we've known Tom Brady to have. And it just hasn't been there. He just doesn't have time, and he's having to get the ball out very quickly. So for that reason, and the fact that he doesn't run, I don't love him in a captain or MVP spot. Would much rather one of his pass catching options, but you absolutely do need to consider him in your lineup just because there's a really good chance he's getting you 15 to 18 fantasy points. And if he does, that's likely going to be an optimal lineup. So next, let's look at the Tampa Bay running backs here. So we have Leonard Fournette, who is questionable. Make sure you pay attention to that. Just because if he doesn't, we have Rashid White in a great spot here. And he would be getting all the carries, not to mention, like I said, the O-line issues. So there's going to be a lot more dump offs, especially to a good receiving back. Now, if Fournette plays, they're both in an okay spot. I think both of them are going to have opportunities to catch the ball, and that just really raises their floor. Now, they probably are both a little bit too expensive for the roles they have. If Fournette's back, I would still expect a pretty much of a split backfield here, but there's a good chance of one of them getting into the end zone. Also, there's going to be dump offs to be had, raising both of their floors. So I think it is an interesting spot. Saints D is good versus running backs, though. They are 8th versus opposing running backs. So the D does try and key in. The D is similar to Tampa Bay, where they try and stop the run, therefore stop the running back as well. But I think both these pieces are interesting just because of the dump offs that Brady will send their way. Now, we have Chris Godwin. He is the 1A or 1B, if you want, of the wide receiver core. But with this O-line and the shorter to medium routes that he runs, he's been acting as the one. Brady's looking to him often. He is the obvious choice here. I like Godwin. He's going to get peppered with targets. The interesting thing to me, though, is with Mike Evans here. Now, if Marshawn Lattimore is out, I like Evans a lot. One of the things with Evans is his ADOT is way deeper. He has a ceiling, and I really think there's going to be a 150-yard, 3-touchdown game coming soon out of Evans. He keeps getting targeted deep. Him and Brady just haven't matched up, but it's coming. The workload's there. He is still a good receiver. So I like Evans a lot if Lattimore is out. If he's in, I don't like him that much. And the reason being is him and Lattimore have really gone at it over the last couple years. They've had a couple times where there's been ejections because the two are just nonstop butting heads, and Lattimore is really good against bigger physical wide receivers like Evans. So unfortunately, if Lattimore's in, I'm not too into Evans, but I would be into a couple of other pass catchers here as our sleepers on the Tampa Bay Bucks. We have Julio Jones, Russell Gage if he plays. If Gage doesn't play, I think Scotty Miller is interesting. And then also you got to look at the tight ends a little bit. Brate and Otten are both possible to play. Brate is questionable. If he doesn't play, I obviously like Otten a little bit more. Brate is dealing with an illness, so we're not really sure how he's feeling yet. But so pay attention to that, because if Brate is out, Otten is definitely in play as somebody you should target as far as a pass catcher here. Now, my favorites, captains or MVPs, we're looking at Chris Olave, Rashid White. That is if Fournette is out. If he's in, I think you can play one of the running backs at MVP captain. One of them is likely to probably get a touchdown and 5-6 catches. So they're in play. It's just going to be way harder to pick which one it is. And then I really like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Evans, obviously, more. I like him more if Lattimore is out. So just pay attention to that news today, because the news is big and it's really going to change the slate here. I tried my best to kind of give you all perspectives. Now let's get into our touchdown calls of the day. So I'm going to go with Chris Olave. Pretty simple here. It is a pass funnel defense. There's major secondary issues as far as them being injured, and the path of least resistance is absolutely attacking this Tampa Bay secondary. And why not do it with the number one wide receiver? Which brings me into my prop pick. I am also taking Chris Olave. We're going over 58.5 receiving yards. I just think this number is too low. He's been over 64% of the games. It's a pass funnel defense, and we're just going to keep picking on that secondary. Secondary deserves to be picked on, especially when the back end of it is super injured. So that is our game today. Those are our plays. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time, guys. Thank you very much. Bye.